Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the very first Job Train How Talent session of 2025. You'll forgive me especially, if we're a little bit rusty this morning, because it feels like an age since we did the last one, even though it was just the end of last year, but a lot's happened since then. But we're really, really glad that you can all join us this morning, both on Crowdcast and on LinkedIn as well. I'm Giles, I'm your host for this morning. And before we get started, can I just check that everybody can see and hear us okay? If you could pop something in the chat, that would be great. Once to know you can all see and hear us, we'll get started. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Laura. Brill. Thanks, Diana. Good to see you. Brill. Excellent. Right, we can get started. So for those of you that are not familiar with these sessions, here at Job Train, we're not all just about delivering recruitment technology and applicant tracking systems and tech and what have you. We like to open up the conversation and offer information, guidance, insight into all kinds of other areas of recruitment and HR. And this is definitely one of those sessions this morning. We will, through the course of this year, aim to run these pretty much monthly. And I'm pleased to say that we've already got sort of the first 3 sessions organised for you for this year. So obviously kicking off this morning as we talk about employee advocacy. We're running another session on the 19th of February with Recite Me, all about the key to attracting diverse talent. Very hot topic indeed. And then in March on the 12th, I'm going to be joined by Suki Carey, who's the head of membership experience at the Talent Labs, previously the firm, to talk about future-proofing your talent strategy for 2025. Another great guest, and really looking forward to that session as well. So do feel free. I'm sure Alex will probably drop in the chat a link to where you can register for those webinars, but we hope to see as many of you as possible on those. Anyway, that's enough about the future. Let's switch on to today. And I'm absolutely delighted to be joined, possibly for the 3rd time in the last 4 years since we started running these sessions, by Maureen Brown, who is the founder and CEO of MySay. Mo, do you want to give a quick introduction for those of you that may not know you, and a little bit about MySay as well?
Yeah, and thank you for having me back as well. I love coming and talking on these sessions. So yeah, for those that don't know me, I am the chief executive, which sounds very grand. I'm not a grand person, of MySay. We're an employee research business. We specialize in new starter surveys, leaver surveys, and interviews, stay interviews. Really just working with companies in whichever way you need us to help you really give your employees a voice and understand what it is that they are telling you in a psychologically safe environment, so that you know that the feedback that you're getting is honest and real and actionable. We help you minimize your feedback action gap. And I also have another business called Sullivan Brown HR Recruitment. So this topic is one that's really important to me because I see it from both an employee research point of view, but also how useful this is as a recruiter. You know, I'm a recruiter by trade, 27 years now, I think. Oh my God, before the internet. And I so yeah, I see things from a recruitment point of view, a HR point of view, and an employee research point of view.
Brilliant. Excellent. Thank you for that. And I love your passion, and I'm sure that's going to come through in this morning's conversation. So let's kick off. Employee advocacy. What is it, and why is it important for organizations?
I just can't speak more and more passionately about employee advocacy and why it is important. So I did prepare some slides. I don't know whether you can all see those at the moment, but yeah, there we go.
By magic.
So there we are. So yeah, employee advocacy is really, I mean, it says it here on the slide, but it's about how employees perceive their employer and how they speak about you to other people. So if we think about how we live, we as humans, we often buy things on recommendation. You know, I've bought cars, watches, holidays, all kinds of things on the recommendations of people that I trust. And leavers and starters in particular really hold a unique view of an organization's strengths, weaknesses. You know, when people choose to join or leave a business, they are particularly focused at that time on what is a very complex decision. So all of the things you're good at, all of the things that you're not so good at as they perceive them as an organization. And if you can measure that, and if you can utilize that in the way that you shape your people strategy, in the way that you shape your employer brand, in the way that you market your organization to potential new recruits, but also to customers. And I think this is where I say it's a completely underutilized measure, and I feel very strongly about that there's often a lack of joining up what employees are saying and what customers are saying, and how that speaks. I remember, Giles, you giving a presentation at one of our events. Do you know what? I don't know how many years ago now. I'm going to say 8.
Wow, we've
And
known each other that long.
you spoke about a recruitment process that your wife had gone through and how the process did not match the brand. Now, I still remember who that company was. That's about 8 years ago. I imagine everyone in the room does. I won't say it here, but I think that advocacy, companies are much better at measuring customer advocacy than they are employee advocacy. And I think that employee advocacy is just as important, and it's something that is completely missed, either because companies don't really understand how to leverage it and how to measure it, or because they just have not realized yet how important it is beyond the obvious. So
Yeah, for
so
sure.
yeah.
We have recruitment teams, marketing comms teams, or even external agencies that invest a
Mhm.
huge amount of time, effort, love, and money in creating incredible EVPs, employer value propositions, careers websites, engaging content. The recruiters are really focused on that during the recruitment process itself.
Yeah,
But if all of that falls away and there's a disconnect when the new person starts, then therein lies the problem. And I
yeah.
guess that's the importance of the new starter check-ins.
Absolutely. New starters, leavers, I've talked a lot about that in the slides that I'm talking about, but actually stay interviews are really important as well, and making sure that you speak to people about how they're experiencing it beyond an engagement survey. So I'm a huge fan of engagement surveys, but they don't really give you this information. And so measuring your advocacy is massively important. And I think at a time when perhaps companies are less focused on it at the moment, because it's an employer's market, and I say that in inverted commas because it really isn't, even though there's a lot more people looking, and advert responses are high, it is not an employer's market. In fact, it never should be, and it should never be seen as one, because that's where people start to let their process slip. They take candidates for granted. Sometimes they don't deliver the level of service that they have previously, when actually this is when people really need it. And so advocacy isn't just about what people experience, it's about how they feel about it. Because if we think about how people buy, so we all buy with emotion and justify with logic. That's proven. It's what we do. Otherwise design or anything wouldn't exist, because we don't need a really expensive handbag. We just need something to carry stuff. We attach emotion to it. And it's the same with employee experience. It's the same with starter experience and leaver experience. And in this market, when people are finding the job market really difficult, the companies that really give great experience are the ones that can hugely benefit from advocacy. So I think it's something that's massive. And if we do know that advocacy is important. So I've put some examples on a slide here to kind of bring that to life a little bit. But measuring your advocacy from starters, it should be a massive part of your culture. You should understand what people are experiencing during that time, and it's the same with your levers, and I think levers in particular as well, because we've always had Glassdoor. So, no, we haven't always. It feels like we've always had Glassdoor. Am I a huge fan of it? Not really. I think it encourages people to leave extremes of feedback, or it can be managed by employers. So I was having a look yesterday at the top employers on Glassdoor. They're all massive businesses with huge budgets. Well, what a surprise. So at some point you've got to try and own your own narrative a little bit. But I love this analogy. I saw it go around on LinkedIn a few times with Prince Harry there, of me speaking to HR. Thank you very much. I love my time here. But me on Glassdoor, and then it's his spare biography. It's so true. And someone sent that to me actually when they saw it on LinkedIn. They were like, saw this and thought of my say. And I laughed a lot. But actually, it's so true. Companies don't do exit surveys well in a lot of cases. It's often a tick box exercise to say, yeah, we did it. Managers filled it in. It's there on the system. Chances are you're not getting accurate information, and you don't really understand how people feel. So you're hearing something and then they're going on Glassdoor to have their say, because They feel like they want to have a voice. You know, we're human. We want to have a voice. We want to say something. And so we go and say it there. And people make it, judgments on you as an employer from what they see on there, but it's not necessarily representative of how you are as an employer. And then, of course, we have QuitTok. So QuitTok, I want to say it's relatively new. I mean, it's newer than Glassdoor. It has millions of views on TikTok. So, you know, a lot of us, me, are of a generation that don't really use TikTok. My daughter does. I don't really, but people are out there recording videos of them leaving their job and giving reasons about why they've left and posting it on TikTok and hashtagging it QuitTok, and people are looking at it. People will find a way to have a voice if you don't let them. And, you know, in the days of social media, it can hurt you. It can hurt your employer brand. And I think there are lots of ways that you can own the narrative a little bit more. So when we work with customers on their starter interviews, their leaver interviews, we tell them what their starter NPS is and their leaver NPS. So you can measure advocacy. You can have a narrative around it. And you can put it out there. So much like you would go on TripAdvisor and have a look at the score of a hotel, or when you're on booking.com, look at the reviews, or on Amazon. You know, we all do it. We all look at the reviews to verify, prove, disprove a decision that we're about to make. Job seekers are doing exactly the same thing, and customers are doing exactly the same thing. So how do you put across what the experience is of your employees? So we measure leaver NPS. So you can see our
Just to pause you there, just for anybody who may not be aware, what is NPS?
Okay, so it's your net promoter score. So, you know, a lot of people will have a look at their customer net promoter score to see what customers are thinking of them. And most organizations now have an employee engagement survey. So they will calculate their ENPS, which is what their employees think of them, and the level of advocacy amongst your employees. We calculate ENPS with our stay interviews, but with our starter and leaver surveys, we tell you what your starter NPS is and your leaver NPS. And there's very little benchmark information out there for that because nobody has really been doing it on reporting it. So we've built our own benchmark information over the last few years. And we've interviewed thousands of leavers now across various organizations and various sectors, and starters as well. So minus 30.59 was the last kind of benchmark leaver NPS that we had in our statistics when I last looked. Of course, it changes all the time. We think that if you've got a leaver NPS of somewhere between minus 20 and 0, you're doing okay. You're about average. You know, you expect it to be a little bit negative because it's your leavers. These are people who've chosen to leave you. Starter NPS 52.89. So that's also good. So you want your starter NPS to be way up in the positive. You want it to be somewhere up. You want it to be higher than your ENPS essentially, because these are the people that are just starting. You're just loving them. You're in the, you know, the first flushes of romance. They should be absolutely loving you at this point. Now, obviously, that's not always the case. So taking the time to ask and making sure that people love you at that point is massive, and it's something that not every company gets right. Levers, I think, give you huge amounts of information. And there's, you know, I could talk massively about what you should ask in a leaver survey. It should be way beyond why are you leaving, and how you're viewing that. But having advocacy from your leavers and having them go out there and talk about you positively and your new starters is a huge benefit to any business. And I just think so few businesses are leveraging this. So few businesses are measuring it. They don't know how to measure it, or they're not taking it seriously. It's done as, yes, we do a starter survey. Yes, we do a leaver survey. But how seriously are you taking that feedback, and how accurate is that feedback? And do you know what a gold mine that is if you're just not doing it properly? It's so underutilized, Giles.
So ultimately what you're saying is that around Glassdoor and QuitTok, they are a direct consequence of perhaps you not providing a platform or a place where people can openly share what their experience looks like.
Yeah.
And but secondly, I guess my challenge is, and perhaps a lot of people might feel this in terms of exit interviews, it can be quite an uncomfortable thing where if you've taken the decision to disengage, leave, or move on from an organization, you may just be paying a little bit of lip service to the process as an exiting employee. How can you ensure that you capture some meaningful feedback and put them in a place where they feel they can talk quite openly?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And of course, people might say, well, you would say this, but I genuinely believe, and this is where my say came from, that companies should not be doing exit interviews themselves. I genuinely believe that. I think if you want to talk to somebody about something that has potentially been a really negative experience for you, you want to talk to somebody independent. So a lot of the companies that we work with have come to us because they really want this insight and they know they're struggling to get it. And there are a number of reasons they struggle to get it. First is, how do we ask it? So if it's just an online survey, getting people to engage with that is really difficult. And have you got the right questions in there for people to feel that they've actually had their say? So that's the first thing. The second challenge is, who asks it? So if it's your manager, how honest are you going to be if that manager is one of the reasons that you're looking to leave? Now, I could go into that in great detail. It's actually not always the manager these days. That's been a huge change in feedback over the last few years. But you're not going to say, we're all human. So unless you're really angry, the chances of saying, well, Giles, it's you actually is the reason I'm leaving, I'm probably not really going to want to do that.
And that person's
I
going to be
think
your referee for your next role or the role after that ultimately as well. So you're going to be doing everything you
exactly.
can to make sure you're leaving on good terms, even if underneath it
Exactly.
all, you've got the feeling that, you're a
Yeah.
crap boss ultimately.
Yeah. And also, even if someone is really honest, so say I really don't like you, Giles, and you've treated me horribly, and I'm going to tell you this is my pretty woman moment. Big mistake. I'm going to tell you everything you did to me and how you made me feel. But then the manager's job is to relay that information to HR. So are they honestly going to say, it was me, it was my fault, I did some awful thing? Like, they're just not, probably not. So there's an element of Chinese whispers then in how that feedback is relayed. Um, so there's that. And if it's HR asking the questions, I mean, I love HR people. It's my world. I've been a HR recruiter for 27 years. The majority of the people that I speak to on a day-to-day basis are HR people, and I know some brilliant ones, but you're not independent. You're just not. You might be well intended, you might be the most gorgeous person in the world, but you are not independent, and therefore people have a nervousness about telling you the truth. And then even if people are being honest with you, there's also the way in which you hear the feedback. So as a manager, as a HR person, if I've worked really hard to try and be a good employer, a good manager, put in good people strategies, and people are being negative about what I've put in place, it's really hard to hear it without immediate bias, either from a defensive nature or a really upset nature. It's really hard to hear it. Even if you get all of that right, you're then left with a lot of information in different forms, different formats. How do you collate it into something useful? It's incredibly challenging and time consuming. So when we're working with customers, our surveys are actually quite long. They cover the whole of employee experience because you don't want to miss that opportunity to understand how someone's experienced all of their colleague life cycle, not just the reason they're leaving, which actually doesn't always tell you that much in the greater scheme of things. But we then spend a lot of time, we have dashboards, we have data, but also we spend a huge amount of time reading that feedback, theming the feedback from a thematic and sentiment analysis perspective, really understanding where people are feeling the experience, not just experiencing it, but how they feel about it and what's really impacting their well-being, their, where they're attaching lots of sentiment and emotion to things. And it's a time consuming job to bring it into an insightful format that actually can be measured and used. And I think that's one of the challenges. I mean, there's so many challenges to getting it right internally, but I think the who, the how, the what, and then how you actually make that feedback useful is a real challenge for organizations. And that's possibly why it just gets pushed to one side and seen as a nice to have. And it becomes this tick box rather than anything insightful.
Sorry about the cough. So in an ideal world, employers would flock to an organisation like MySate to
Yeah, great.
manage all of their
Please do.
their starter employee and leaver
Mm.
interviews. But for people here who just want to get started,
Yeah.
understand the sentiment, what the experience is, and start to take some data points and start to respond and learn from that, how do
Mm.
people get started?
Yeah, so moving on to the kind of next slide that I put together, I think of course it would be great if everybody wanted to work with us, and I just think there's always an advantage of using an independent. But if we can move on to the next slide, I think we're still on the next one. There are definitely things that people can do. So how can you make advocacy a key metric? So first of all, I've put there a quote from a lady called Kate Carlson, who is the Chief People Officer at a company called Opencast. They've done exactly this. They have made advocacy a key metric, and it is a key point on their executive meeting agenda. And what Opencast realized very early on is that in their sector, it's tech, people moving on is an absolute inevitability. And you can tie yourself in knots trying to keep people and be a brilliant employer and then beating yourself up when people leave. But actually, in this sector, people will leave to experience different tech, and there's not a lot they can do about that. So actually, the key advantage to them is to send those people off to work with other tech businesses and in other tech customers as absolute advocates of Opencast. And they have totally nailed this. Their leaver NPS is better than most companies' eNPS. I mean, it's what they've done is astonishing, and they've done it because they've prioritized it and because they genuinely believe in it. So, how can you do that? So, first of all, you can put in regular surveys and feedback mechanisms. So, if you don't have a budget or the will or the time to engage with an external supplier, do at least make sure that you have some regular surveys and feedback mechanisms in there. Whether that's just using SurveyMonkey or some other kind of free survey tool, you can do it and you can ask and make sure that you do, but make sure that there is a feedback mechanism in there for somebody to actually do something with the feedback. The worst thing you can do is ask and do nothing with it. That is not going to build advocacy. It's going to create the opposite. It's going to just make people tired of being asked, and they're just not going to give you honest experience. So of course you can do that. If it's the least you can do, ask them, but make sure that you do something with that feedback and that you read it. Do ask about onboarding experience and do take that seriously. So understand more than just if you're going to ask people about their experience of joining you, and it's the same with leavers, don't ask them why they joined and why they're leaving on its own. Do ask those questions because it's useful information, but ask more than that. What has their experience been so far? So with onboarding, for example, we choose to do it about 3 months in, when they can tell us more about the experience they've had of, are you getting regular one-to-ones from your managers? Have you had the right tools to make you successful in your role? Did the onboarding and induction set you up for success in your role? How have you experienced our systems? How have you experienced our culture? How have you experienced our leadership team? Those kind of things. Make it broader, very much in line with an engagement survey, so that people can give you their full experience. And if you can, give them somewhere where they can comment freely. Don't just ask them for tick box questions. Give them somewhere where they can actually share their feedback, because often human feedback can be contradictory. And again, if you're going to do it, take the time to read it. Culture audits, a bit bigger, so probably not just the minimum that you would do, but a really good place to start, because they help you understand, do we actually even have a good culture here for setting people up to give us honest feedback? Because actually there's no point in asking if you don't have a culture where people feel that they are allowed to speak up and that they just need to be silent. We've done a whole seminar on silence not being golden. So it is good to understand the culture that you work in, but that is a big piece of work. Leadership accountability, I think, is massive, and this is where HR teams can really push with their leaders to make them understand the importance of advocacy, that it is as important as customer feedback, and that it should be sitting on those exec agendas as what are our people saying from a listening point of view? Are we hearing them? What are people telling us? Are we going to do anything about that? How do we feedback that back? How do they feel heard? And then owning your narrative. So if you're going to ask, have something that you can take out of those surveys that you can share with the world, so that you're not just reliant on what people are saying about you on Glassdoor and what they're saying about you on TikTok. Own your own narrative about what people are saying about when they join you, or even better, when they leave you. Because if your leavers are being really positive about you, then you're getting something absolutely right. I will just say there's a QR code there on that slide. We've pulled together a white paper and a whole document covering all of these points and more information and case study on Opencast and what they did. So if you want to scan that QR code, it will take you to a whole load more information on work that you can do on this.
And I know it's quite small on the screen, just so for everybody here, we will do it's like a write-up blog and a follow-up, and we'll include these slides within that. So don't worry if for any reason you can't scan it on this screen. We'll make sure that you'll have a copy. And I think all of that advice and guidance is really helpful. It's things that people can get started with straight away. I can say from our own experience at JobTrain, we ran a culture audit and survey last year. It was such a good thing to do, because we recognised that as, like, if you like, as directors or a strategic leadership team, we felt we knew what the culture was with the JobTrain, but we've all been here a really long time. Yeah. And the fact is that culture is it's living, it's breathing, it's constantly evolving. It's obviously the collection of everybody's experience then creates that culture. And it was really interesting for us to see what everybody else's assessment feeling about the organisation was. And there was so much there to learn. There's a lot of positives, which was great, but we've got a very diverse team, from, especially in terms of age groups, and people in their early 20s right up to, you know, the senior leadership team, some of us are in our 50s, and there's a big gap there in terms of age range. So it's such a healthy thing to do. There's so much that can be learned from it as well.
Yeah. And I think with advocacy, you know, there's so many reasons that you should have a whole holistic listening strategy. And as I say, there's details available via the QR code on that. You know, and advocacy is something that that comes out, you know, can grow out of being an employer that listens and giving people that safe space to speak, and then doing something with the feedback. I think, you know, we've all seen, you know, over the years, employee referral schemes and people wanting to make the most of those. But actually, as a recruiter, I've never really seen them work. You know, if you have to pay people to refer you as an employer, you're probably not getting it right. If you want to reward people brilliantly, great, but if you are genuinely an employer that is creating employees who are advocates because you genuinely are passionate about it, or because you just realize there's commercial advantage, for whichever reason you're doing it, it will happen on its own. And not only will they refer people that they know and like to work with you or work for you, but they'll also refer people to use your services. And I think this is the big thing that sometimes companies miss. You know, employees are advocates in all kinds of ways, that you will buy things from them as well as just want to work with them. So it's just much more about being less transactional about it and more strategic about it. And there's a whole suite of metrics in the world of recruitment and HR that we've always stuck to, you know, in recruitment: time to hire, cost to hire. Who's measuring the advocacy of the new starters that you've brought in as a team? I just think we need to think differently about the way that we measure success of our recruitment strategies and people strategies. And this is a great way of doing that can set you apart from other businesses that aren't quite there with it yet. So plus it means that you've got happier, engaged people, which I'm a huge fan of.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. When we're talking about employee advocacy, we're also talking about alumni advocacy as well.
Yeah.
The job market has changed so much in that people don't stay in role or don't stay with an organisation for as long as they once did. But then you always have the opportunity for, and you reference this actually with your tech client, for people to perhaps leave your organisation, have experience of another employer, another business, another way of doing things, and then sometimes return. So we had a returner just after COVID, actually, and it was great to welcome them back. And we've got a second returner who left our business maybe 4 years ago, and they've now come back with a wealth of experience in terms of different ways of doing things, different tech, a different skill set, and we're just going to take advantage of that in a really positive way. And you know, we're really looking forward to welcoming them back. So there's always that opportunity that the people that leave may well come back, and they'll be an even better, bigger version of themselves, and that's something that you know, we'll all benefit from.
Yeah, I mean, one of the questions that we ask in our leaver surveys is, would you return? And actually, the amount of people that would return is often quite high. So we then go on to ask the question, what would have to change for you to come back? Now, sometimes people give us loads of information about what would have to change. Some people say, nothing. I just want to gain this particular experience or try this, and I need to go somewhere else to do that. That's really useful information, because if you're measuring your success on retention, well, you might never have a chance of retaining those people because there's just an area of experience that you can't give to somebody. But treat them well and give them a voice as a leaver. And yes, they might come back, or they might tell other people to come to you. So I just think it's a very different way of thinking about it, but there's huge advantages to businesses of doing that.
Absolutely. I mean, I can think of somebody that we interviewed quite a few years ago that we didn't actually hire at the time. The timing wasn't right. The role wasn't quite a match for them. Now they've become a customer of ours. They had this experience of us through the recruitment process. So they've got a sense of our culture. And a few years later, I think we had a couple of opportunities where we nearly worked with one another. And now we've got a fantastic relationship with them. They're now a customer. So that kind of just goes to show the potential power of it. In terms of marketing, in terms of growing a business, as much of it is in terms of looking after your people and making sure they've got a positive experience and they've got a voice.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to go back to something I said earlier, I think it often gets lost when the market is noisy like this, where employees are getting lots of direct response to adverts and are doing a lot of hiring themselves. That's great because you might hire, but what experience are the people having that are coming through your process? And then what are they experiencing when they're starting? Are they feeling loved? Are they feeling heard? Are they feeling set up for success? Are they feeling valued? Because these are the types of sentiments that we see coming out all of the time. And if you can get that right, it can have a massive impact commercially on your business, as well as just from a people experience. Because I get that not all leaders are that bothered about people having a brilliant experience. I wish they were, but guess what? They're not. But they are bothered about business performance, and this can have a huge impact on that. And us as HR professionals and people professionals and recruitment professionals, we need to be able to articulate that to our leadership team so they understand the commercial benefit as well. Otherwise, we'll never be able to make this as big a thing as it should be.
Yeah, not wanting to divert you in terms of your flow and stuff, but also I think sometimes when organizations sit down and try to define or understand what their employer brand is, some sat there scratching their heads and like, well, what can we make up? What can we say that will entice people in? But if you're listening to new starters, employees, and leavers' real life experience of it, there's going to be a lot of common ground in there that starts to inform you as to what that is. Because it exists. Yeah. Every organization has an employer brand, whether they realize it or not.
Yeah.
That could be really positive. It may have negative elements to it.
Yeah, well, one of the questions we ask in our starter surveys is how much has your experience so far matched your expectations from when you joined? And it's a really interesting question. Some companies are absolutely nailing this. And it always lands well with people if what they're experiencing is what they expected. But one of the common themes that we see emerging a lot within surveys is expectation setting. And sometimes we see it as a positive and sometimes we see it as a negative. And I don't believe necessarily, because I'm a recruiter, and I don't believe that recruiters are out there misleading people on purpose. I don't believe. There will be a couple in the agency world, not us, that are kind of, beefing things up to get someone to commit to a job. But actually, that's not common practice, I don't believe. What I think is that there's a mismatch between what people think is attractive about their business and what actually attracted someone to their business, what people will enjoy about working there, and what they actually enjoy about working there, and what they think people experience when they start and what they actually experience when they start. And there's just a huge amount of benefit to really understanding that, both from a how are we selling ourselves? Because the thing that might be keeping people here or people really enjoy about working here might be completely different from the thing we think it is and what we're selling. And it's definitely not free fruit, cycle to work scheme, electric company car lease scheme. It just isn't. So really understand why people are joining you and what they are valuing. Understand what they are experiencing when they join you. And is there anything that can be improved there to make that experience better? And then I think also understand why people are leaving. And there are great benefits to that. But you also have to look at the push and pull factors. So why are people really leaving? You have to give people to the chance to explain that. It's a complex decision. So if you ask them a one-liner, what's your reason for leaving? Forget it. You're not going to know. You're not going to find out. Give them enough opportunity to share with you, and also then look out for the flags between why people say they're joining and why people say they're leaving. Because what we often see, people joining for career progression, leaving because of lack of career progression, joining for work-life balance, leaving because lack of work-life balance. There's something they're hearing, there's something they're seeing in the way that you're selling you as an employer that they're not then experiencing when they land, and they're leaving for the same reason. So it gives you really early red flags of, okay, something either isn't right here. Either people are reading something, or we've got something out there that they are seeing and they're thinking, hang on a minute, that's not really the case, which is never great. If you buy something, and really employment is a purchasing decision. We choose to buy what that
A
employer
huge
is
one at
telling us.
that.
Yeah, massive. One of the biggest purchasing decisions we make. Now, if you ever think about if you book a table at a restaurant or you book a holiday, I mean, a hotel is a perfect one, isn't it? You book a hotel based on the brochure and you turn up to that hotel and it doesn't quite look like what you were sold. The brochure contained the one room that's been recently refurbed, but you're in a horrible back room with no window and dirty grout in the shower. You're going to tell people that. You're probably going to tell more people than if it had looked like the brochure. And that is exactly what happens in employment experience, especially if someone's had a bad day. And people have feedback mechanisms at their fingertips now. They can go on Glassdoor, they can go on TikTok, they can go on LinkedIn, they can share feedback about you. Why would you not make it a priority to be able to either manage that from the start and reduce the amount of times people feel the need to go and do that? Or that if they feel the need to go and do that, it's because they're delighted. They're on LinkedIn or QuitTok because, oh my God, my employer did this for me today. I mean, how much better than that is, the spare example? You can control that narrative for yourself. And even if someone leaves a bad review, if you think about TripAdvisor, you read the one bad review, but the overall reviews are like 4.5. It's the same with your lever NPS. If you get a few extreme views, individuals' experiences will always be their own, and you literally can't please everyone all the time. It'd be great if you could, but you can't. But if you've got a measure that shows that is out of the ordinary, it's not the norm, you have a right to reply, and you can say what people actually do value, and you can measure that. Whereas someone's just writing negative things about you on Glassdoor, it's so difficult to counter if you've not got any evidence to do that. So there's so many reasons why it should be up there as a key strategic measure and a priority, I feel.
See, you touched on a strategic measure, and that is interesting because if you want to implement a new way of doing things, initiative like this, a really important part of understanding what people's employee experience looks like. What advice would you give to people here about how best to influence senior leadership execs to recognize and embrace the importance of it and implement it? Because ultimately, practices or strategies like this only really work once they've got exec buy-in.
Absolutely. And it's a really good question. And actually, when I do interviews with senior HR people, one of the questions I ask is, how can HR people who are struggling to have influence with senior leaderships do it? And they always give me the same answer. Build a business case. Ultimately, you've got to show value. We have to do that for our customers. You have to do that for the leadership team. So first of all, it's the same with any people initiatives, isn't it? It's understanding what the objectives of the leadership team are and making sure that what you are trying to achieve is in line with those objectives. I think the challenge that people have when they're trying to promote starter interviews, leaver interviews, stay interviews, listening strategy in terms of advocacy is that a lot of leaders still see it as a nice to have. They see it as a fluffy thing that is all about making people happy at work, which, frankly, I think is massively important. And a lot of HR people do too. But it doesn't necessarily influence senior leaders to shell out and invest in something and give you the sign off. But I think you have to understand the key objectives of those leaders, understand what makes them tick, and then build a business case that plays to that. Again, it's sales, isn't it? In the same way. And I think HR people have got really good at selling the benefits of engagement surveys. Like when I started in HR recruitment and in the world of HR, not every company was doing an engagement survey. Seems really hard to believe now, but now well over 90% of companies are doing an engagement survey. It's just accepted that that is something you should do. At some point, that was sold to a leadership team as something that should be invested in. And I think HR people now really believe in that and they do that. I think the thing with stay interviews, culture surveys, starter interviews, leaver interviews, that a lot of leaders just still see them as a bit of a nice to have. So we have to build the business case for it. And different companies will have different business cases for it. So if I think about the customers that we work with, Opencast, theirs was all about advocacy. And that was lovely for us because we didn't expect that. When we launched MySay, we expected to be dealing with a lot of companies that had high attrition. That was what we were thinking. And of course we do that. So if you have high attrition and that is costly to your business, which it is, as we know, then you need to build a financial business case around reducing that. If it's about losing vital skills, then you need to understand the cost benefit of doing it so that you are retaining the people that you want to retain. We have other companies that have done it because they're having a significant issue with early attrition. And certainly as we move towards day one rights in the employment rights bill, that's going to be a big thing, because making a wrong hire is going to become an awful lot more costly and impactful to your organization. So if it's around that, then build your business case around that. We worked with one organization on their leaver interviews, and they asked us to do a stay interview project on the back of that, because there was a couple of departments that were particularly proving to be tricky in terms of attrition. We did stay interviews with them, and they've managed to reduce early attrition in a key business area by 35% on the back of that feedback, by really taking it seriously and having no feedback action gap around that and actually doing what was said. So depending on what it is that you're trying to achieve, I think you've got to be clear about why you think it's a good idea, why you really want to do it, but crucially what the business benefit is that you feel that you can get from it. So it's not always about reducing attrition, although that is going to save you money. It might be about speed to competence. It might be about engagement in a particularly key area. It might be about advocacy. There's all kinds of reasons that you should be doing this. It's about understanding what's going to matter most to your organization and where the leaders are really going to see the benefit of it, because there will be a benefit somewhere. You've just got to frame it correctly.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And I think at the most basic level, if you want to do a calculation, it's looking at what is the cost to us as a business for actually hiring somebody.
Yeah.
What is the cost to us as a business of actually bringing that person on board to a point where they are both settled and performing, and then using that as a basis for some of the business case as well.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's probably some statistics around the importance of embracing this kind of approach for an organization as well.
Yeah, I mean, I see all kinds of stats out there at the moment about the cost to hire. It ranges from about 6,000 to about £30,000. I mean, choose them as you like. I think day one rights is going to have a massive impact, because it's going to be much harder if you get that wrong, both from an effort and investment point of view and a financial investment point of view. And I think that really plays to advocacy as a key driver, because if you think about the best hires you've made, certainly a lot of the best hires I've made in my career, in my own business, are people that were recommended to me. And people, when I'm hiring for clients in Sullivan Brown, a lot of the best hires that I've done for my clients are from people that were referred to me by somebody that I really trusted. If we're going to have day one rights, hiring someone that you don't know through a really quick recruitment process is going to become more of a risk. It just is. I wish it wasn't, but there you go. It just is. So having your employees as advocates and having them recommend people that they know, that they've worked with before, to come and work for your business could be a massive advantage to you in terms of hiring the right people and being at less risk from the day one rights that are coming in. So there's so many reasons for it. I think it's just really understanding it. I think that the challenge with starter and leaver interviews is that people don't always understand what they're about. So they think it's just about asking why people left. It isn't. It's so much more than that. If you think about engagement surveys, they're very useful. Huge fan of them, as I say, very useful. But you can't just keep asking the same people the same questions over and over again. They will get sick of answering you, and they just will stop. Because you can't action all of the insight that you get. So it becomes almost counterproductive. You just keep asking the same people over and over. And then you go, yeah, but we're just doing pulse. So we're only asking them one question. Yes, but you're still asking the same people over and over. The great thing about starters and leavers is that it's a constantly moving barometer, because no matter how great you are as an employer, people will always be leaving and joining. That's the reality. And if we take Opencast as an example, they actually have very few leavers, but they ask us to do all of their leaver interviews over the telephone. So they're really in depth, and people get an opportunity to speak to us, and we can hear the tone, we can hear the emotion, we can really delve and probe and understand what they're saying. So they get an ongoing barometer of how people are experiencing employment with them, and it goes up and down as it always does. And it's the same with starters. So it's a really handy shifting group of people that are super focused on why they joined or left, and you only ask them that once, ideally. So you're not giving them survey fatigue. You're not asking the same questions over and over again. So it's hugely useful groups of people that are constantly shifting and changing and are constantly fresh to those questions. And so it's a really useful barometer, temperature check of what's happening in your organization. And then you can switch on stay interviews in different areas that you feel that you need to focus it. So I think people need to, so first of all, the people that are trying to influence the leadership team to get the sign off for this need to rethink the way that they see starter and leaver interviews. It's much more than a transactional why did you join
Yeah.
question. It's an ongoing barometer and really useful for all areas of employee experience. So we need to think differently about it. Then we can influence differently. Then we can start taking advantage of it.
Yeah. And if you look at it from a recruitment and employer brand perspective, you think about the number of people that work with your organization right now and their reach in terms of their own networks, whether that's on a professional network, whether it's on social networks and what have you, is likely to be somewhere, I think, in the average is about, 400 connections. So you times that by the number of people that currently work for your organization, then that's a huge reach. If you then add in the people that have left your organization but have had a really good experience and their reach as well, that's a really powerful marketing and even sales engine that can just be working for you at zero cost. And that's a very, very powerful thing to consider.
It's so powerful. And I think at the moment, what we tend to see is people cutting off the problems at the pass. So they allow their people to go to Glassdoor and just write, whatever they want on there, but then they pay a lot of money to have a right to reply. I've even heard of companies out there now that will help you remove all of the bad reviews from your Glassdoor. Well,
yeah, I've seen that.
This isn't great. This isn't what it's supposed to be about. Those people are still out there speaking about you, whether it's on Glassdoor or not. But you essentially have to have this big budget. And now companies are quite accepting of, okay, well, we'll just add that into our budget rather than saying, well, let's control the narrative of what people are saying about us. Let's do everything we can at source so that we don't have to invest that money doing damage limitation and damage control elsewhere. I mean, great if your ex-employees are saying brilliant things about you on Glassdoor. Go ahead, amazing. But actually, there's so much you could do internally as a business that wouldn't cost you quite as much, actually, but that could lead to this. And I think, your point is a good one. If you've got all of that advocacy, that, they're all ambassadors for you and they're out speaking for you, that's brilliant. But imagine now that they're not, they'll be telling many more people. So that reach goes further because you want to tell people. I mean, I don't know about you, Giles, but I've had poor experiences in my employment history. I still tell everyone about them now.
Yeah.
And I've been self-employed for 12 years, so I've been giving myself a great experience because I'm my own boss. But the negative experiences stuck with me way more than the positive ones, and I still talk about them now. And when I meet someone that's had a negative experience with the same business, oh my gosh, do we love talking about that?
Yeah, it's true, and I think it's human nature that people will probably more readily talk about a negative experience than they might do about a positive one.
Yeah.
It's a sad fact that we do live in a culture, a society where we're surrounded by negativity. You've only got to look at the news. Scrolling through Sky News the other morning, there wasn't a single positive headline or news story in there, and that is something that we are hardwired towards. So you've really got to take that into account. But that said, the standout really positive experience is something that we really want to talk about. I'm going to off track a little bit here. My poor mum. So she's stuck at home, can't leave the house, and she has this incredible postman, and she knows that mum loves a Greggs sausage roll. Now, he brings a Greggs sausage roll around to her every single week. And I've been in touch with Raw Mail, took his name and everything just to say what an amazing experience we've had. So those standout experiences that you have remain with you just as much as the negative ones do. Absolutely. And ultimately, we live in a world where we'd far rather talk about more positive experience than we would grumble about all the negative ones that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. Interestingly, I did just on the topic of Greggs, I did a crowdcast interview with the chief exec of Greggs, Roisin Curry, last year, and she talks a lot about this advocacy, the power of people within Greggs, the power that they give to people. It's available on our crowdcast if you want the link to share with people. But she is fascinating on this and about giving people a voice and giving people responsibility and Greggs people as advocates. And it's fascinating. I think we can all see the impact that has had on them as an employer and as a commercial business. So yeah, I think even if the postman wasn't and Greggs heard your story, they would probably hand deliver a sausage roll to your mum. But yeah, absolutely. And that's why I think advocacy is so underutilized, underplayed, undermeasured. It's an incredibly valuable tool. I mean, if I think about the customers I have at Sullivan Brown, so in my HR recruitment world, over 90% of our business comes by recommendation or referral. because we've done a good job for somebody. That, and we do a good job for someone because we genuinely care about it. It's the kind of people that we are. And I know, I've recommended job train because I've implemented job train before, and you were great with me. You really helped me out, and so I recommend job train. That is how the world works. And
Absolutely, it is.
and
Yeah.
yet we're really happy to take starter experience, leaver experience as a transactional survey that someone just ticks a box, or a manager just uploads a reason for leaving, which is other, or pay or career development, which are the things that are so easy for people to say because they don't want to share anything that's particularly, difficult or horrible, because you're asking them when they're still there, and
Yeah.
they've still got to, because that's the other thing we do. We try to ask leavers once they've left, so that even though we're independent, they don't fear any repercussion. And I'll tell you something interesting about stay interviews that we do. Obviously, stay interviews are with colleagues. So, and we're asking them questions like, have you looked for another job in the last 6 months? Have you, or do you think you'll still be here in 12 months? What jobs did you apply for? What was your interview experience? Why are you still here? What frustrates you most about, really kind of personal questions that they may not want to share with their manager. We've done some of those for companies who've done it in place of their engagement survey because they just wanted to get something deeper. And often when they do that, what we hear from people is absolute fear to speak. Even though we're independent, even though it's confidential, and we reassure them that it is, absolute fear to speak. Now, imagine what they're saying outside of the workplace if they don't feel safe to say it inside. And this is the thing that I think companies really need to understand. It is, if they don't feel they can say it in, they will say it out, and they are saying it about you, and you have lost control of that narrative outside of your business. And if you have control of it, if you do the right things around it, you can turn them into advocates, and it can just be so powerful, for lots of different reasons.
Yeah, I mean, we all have negative experiences, or let's say it's a service that goes wrong somewhere. But when you feel
Mm,
listened and heard as a customer, just as you might do as an employee, you
mm,
can turn that experience around into a really positive one. So, for example,
mm,
you could have somebody with an organisation that's got whatever challenges they may have, whatever grumbles, frustrations they may have. Potentially,
mm,
there's a flight risk for your organisation. But if
mm.
they feel listened and heard, and you have the opportunity to turn that around, then
Yeah.
actually that can come back as an even more positive experience. And I think we've all had
It,
that in terms of being customers as
Yeah,
much as
it
employees.
completely can. Oh my gosh, it completely can. And I think there's something more important coming down the line on this as well. So we all know that the Employment Rights Bill is coming. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but we have lawyers in our network who've spoken to senior HR leaders in our network about this. The Employment Rights Bill presents a lot of challenges for employers. It's giving employees an awful lot of rights, actually some that they don't even want and isn't even going to benefit them.
Mm.
It is going to make life harder as an employer. And we do some events with a law firm up here in the Northeast where I'm sat today. And what Lisa always says from there is, your best defense is trust. At the end of the day, if you have a great listening strategy that is holistic, it's all the way across, the colleague life cycle. If people feel heard, and they feel that they can trust you, and they feel that you're positively intended, they will forgive you if you don't always get everything right. You know,
Totally.
they, if your employees are true advocates for the experience that they're having, and you do something wrong as an employer, which we all will at one point or another, or as a manager, if they can say, we know that's not in character. We know that is outside of the norm for our culture. We know that usually you care what we think, and at some point you've just made a mistake here. Um, you will buy forgiveness, and you will save yourself a lot of trouble. With all of the things that are coming with the Employment Rights Bill, there has never been a more important time to have a great listening culture and strong employee voice within your organizations. It will save you a lot of trouble, because if you don't listen to them, if the unions get the access rights that's proposed, they will listen to them. And then all of a sudden you're unionized. You've got a bit of a problem. So there's so many reasons coming down the line where having listening to employee voice, celebrating employee voice, thanking people for their feedback, acting on their feedback, making them feel heard, letting them know you can trust them, letting them know that they can feel psychologically safe to speak to you, will have so many benefits for businesses coming down the line. And now is really the time to do it, because by the time those rights come in, it's too late. You're done then. You've got no time. So I think that is, all the more reason really to make employee voice important, and to have advocates in your business. Because if you have a bad experience one day and you speak to a colleague and they say, you know what, Giles, you know that isn't really what happens here, you're going to save yourself an awful lot of bother further down the line. So I think
Yeah,
there's so many reasons having advocates in your business is a really good thing.
totally. And, happy people within an organization, you're going to be more productive, they're going to
Of
perform
course.
more, and they're going to go the extra mile and hand out free sausage rolls. That's ultimately what's going to happen, and delighting
Which
customers
is
as a
what we
result.
all want, no?
We all want free
Yeah,
sausage
if
rolls.
all else fails and you can't afford to like outsource your surveys and everything else, just buy sausage rolls every day and you're probably halfway there.
That it's been such a great chat, really inspiring, and an awful lot of practical takeaways that I hope everybody here can just start to implement straight away and reap the benefits from.
Totally.
So I don't know if anybody's got any questions before we pop off, because I'm conscious that we're approaching 12 o'clock and this is an hour session. By all means, I know that I think Alex put in the chat a link through to Mo's LinkedIn. So if you've got any follow-up questions or anything at all, feel free to reach out, connect with Mo. I know Mo would be more than happy to help anybody here. And really just to say huge thanks to you for your time, and thank you to everybody here that's joined us this morning. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have, and hopefully see you on the next session in February.
I'm just reading the comments. It looks like the sausage roll has been the biggest hit of today.
Thanks very much, everybody, and hope you have a great week ahead.
Thanks for having me, Giles. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Absolute pleasure.